Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys, yet again with your host and friendly neighborhood far-right thug, Mr. George Cresswell. Hope we're all doing well. Hope we're all having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever we are. So, first things first, before we get in today, I want to say a massive thank you to all of you guys. You guys who put your comments on the videos, you like the videos, you share them, all of these things. I put a post out on the channel as well, by the way, guys. If you do happen to share anything, if you think that something is worthy of your share, stuff like that, whether it's a clip, whether it's a full episode, whatever it might be, then please tag me in them. Please tag me in them if you share them on like Instagram or X or on YouTube and stuff like that. Please tag me, if anything, just so not only I can like repost it and try and amplify it and stuff like that, although my reach is obviously quite small, very small even, but just so I can say thank you as well, just so I can say thank you, because I greatly appreciate it. I saw somebody that I'm in talks with at the moment, hoping to have as a guest on the podcast in the near future, had shared one of my interviews, and I didn't, he shared it on his X page. I didn't know about it. It wasn't until I went on and scrolled through some of his posts, I just happened to come across it, and I was then able to say thank you. But yeah, tag me on Instagram. If it's on Instagram, it's at Voice of the Valleys. If it's on X, it's at GC_VOT Valleys. So again, go to that post on the YouTube channel. It was posted nearly a day ago now, just 22 hours ago. Another thing I posted about that I wanted to thank you guys as well is that we've just surpassed 100 subscribers on the YouTube channel. So thank you ever so much, ladies and gentlemen, that you've seen the content, whether it's solo episode, whether it's one of the interviews that I've done, and you've sort of given this your nod, being like, I want to see more of this. I want this to come up in my subscription feed. I want to follow this guy. And I really, really appreciate that. I really, really appreciate that either the things that I say or the things that I'm bringing forward, concepts I'm trying to talk about, people that I'm having on as guests and stuff like that. I got a couple more hopefully coming on in the near future. Very, very interesting people, very important stories to share. But thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. I really, really appreciate it. And I just hope that you guys are getting value and insights from the things that we are talking about more than anything. Because a lot of the things that we talk about, such as the first topic we'll be getting on to in a moment, they're not very pleasant. They're not very pleasant topics, right? So this is something that's really, really troubling that's come out of this. It's actually come out of the Irish Parliament, I believe, very recently. And they're basically now hinting at going full communist, it seems. So in Ireland at the moment, something that come up in their parliament recently was a discussion around compulsory purchase order bills and what these bills are supposedly meant to do. And hearing the legislators talking about them, it really, really doesn't sound good. They're designed to make it easier for the state to seize private property. Now, again, that is full, Leninist, Stalinist, communist takeover talk we are talking now, right? So this is from Michael O'Keefe on X. This is from the Irish Parliament, I believe. Very, very scary stuff. And this is the thing, although we have a lot of conflict, especially like nationalist communities, from Ireland versus, Great Britain and stuff like that. Obviously, there's a lot of conflict in these isles going back over that time. I certainly think that in topics like this, in conversations like this, where we're talking about state overreaching, where we're talking about the hijacking of causes like a so-called Palestinian resistance versus, or coinciding that with Irish nationalism, being like we're all in the same fight when the two things couldn't be any different. The pro-Pal people, I think, are in many ways trying to colonize Ireland the same way that the government is trying to hand over Ireland to them in order to expand the welfare state, expand the state capacity to enforce these things, right? So now we're seeing the Irish government, very, very scary for the Irish people, and now seemingly moving straight into full-on seizing of private property. And I'd be very, very concerned if you're a citizen living in Ireland at the moment. And I think there's only going to be a matter of time before these ideas are floated in countries in the UK as well, if they haven't been done so already. Be a clip on screen coming for you in a minute, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, clip should be working. Coming on screen now.
Bill for introduction, compulsory purchase order bill 2025 first stage. I call on Deputy James Gagan to move for leave to introduce the bill. Deputy, 5 minutes.
I move.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken Corley. Today I bring the compulsory purchase order bill 2025 before the House. This piece of legislation will overhaul a fundamental part of our land and planning system, the compulsory acquisition of property. CPOs are integral to the economic development of the country. If the state cannot acquire land in a transparent, timely and cost-effective way, we will not build the infrastructure we need. Without this infrastructure, our economic development will come to a halt.
Just realised something. Those are words that you can use to describe what happened in Russia in the early 1900s, for example. What was the words he said? Cheap, timely and cost effective. Were those the three words that he used? Let me quickly check this out. So he said, in a transparent, timely and cost effective way. That was the words that he used. So just rewatch that little bit of the clip, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll put it back up on screen for you to see the rest of it in a minute. Now, there's one thing that you can say about the communists in Russia. For example, they were very transparent in what they were doing. They did not give a fuck about upsetting people, right? And you're now seeing those echoing through the Irish Parliament. You could literally just replace this. If you replaced this guy with the very weird shaped hairline, it has to be said, very odd shaped hairline. Looks like kind of like a Nike tick on his forehead. But again, you could very easily replace this. If you just said this in Russian, you'd think this is probably coming out of Vladimir Lenin's mouth in 1917, right? So this is very, very scary. Very, very scary. It just shows how much they're planning on ramping it up. And especially when you consider how much Ireland has had to deal with. It's very, very sad how much Ireland has had to deal with in terms of the people that the government have, brought over without the Irish people's consent. How now many customs in Ireland are simply not Irish anymore. You see daily incidents of migrants, of foreigners, in parks like we see in the UK. It's the exact same thing in Ireland. You see them in parks harassing kids. Allegedly, what's going to be going on in the UK down in Norwich, I believe it is, outside one of the hotels in Norwich, I think it is. There's a demonstration going on this Saturday because a migrant allegedly who's residing in this hotel forced a 15-year-old girl to use her hand to satisfy him. So again, I'm trying to be thingy with my words at the moment. So when I start saying these things, I start getting very angry. But yeah, Ireland is in very, very dire straits at the moment. And this is just showing it should be clear now the direction that all our governments are going in. It should be clear the direction that the Labour government is going in and the Labour Plaid coalition is going to be coming in this country is going in. And I'm no reform supporter, for example, but the Labour and Plaid are extremists to the same degree that we are seeing here. Make no mistake about it. Like I said, imagine this, right? We've just said something come up on GB Politics X page, and it said some of the Afghans that are coming in on this scheme now, this resettlement scheme, are prone to radicalization, possibly a danger because of radicalization. I tweeted it, and I said, you don't say, right? But already, think of the cost for that, right? So about 150, we're now looking at more about 200K, right? Afghans coming in, and the costs that have been floated about and stuff like that. I'm going to bring my webcam back a little bit closer because it seems to be popping in and out of focus a lot. There we go. I know I'm out of focus now. Come on. There we are. It's better. So already I think I've seen figures floating about it's going to cost us about £7 billion, right? Now think about this. Plaid are floating the idea of bringing all 1.5 million refugees, quote unquote, from Gaza. Not only some of the most radicalized people on the planet, but think of how much that is going to cost. We will not be able to support that, but that's what our government wants, and they will seize our homes in order to do it. That's exactly what you're seeing in Ireland right now, in this transparent, cost-effective and timely manner that they want to steal your homes and steal your communities that generations of Irish people, generations of English people, generations of Welsh people, generations of Scottish people, our ancestors, spent building. and now government wants to take it all away. And we can't allow that to happen.
We will not build the infrastructure we need. Without this infrastructure, our economic development will come to a halt. A well-functioning CPO system is also essential if we are to meaningfully tackle the housing crisis and end dereliction. These are problems that affect us here in Dublin, but also people in towns and villages right across the country. It should also be put on the record here that the compulsory acquisition of land is a sensitive issue. It's not always pleasant when people are moved involuntarily from their homes or are required to sell their land. Although we need a streamlined and cost-effective CPO system, these landowners are entitled to clarity, transparency and fairness. I believe this bill provides that and strikes the balance needed to make CPOs work.
Yes, compulsory acquisition of things that don't belong to you is fair, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, theft is fair. Woe to those who call good evil and evil good. But what was the bit that he said? It's quite funny that it's not funny. It's not funny, but it's just so funny how brazen they're being about it. It's not, what was the quote? It's not always pleasant when people are moved involuntarily from their homes or required to sell their land. You got to think, with a lot of these radical left-wing politicians, right? Not only that, go back thousands, well, say hundreds of years, you know. We didn't seem to have so much of this problem back then. Without all of this massive state infrastructure, the same way that we're seeing it now, this nanny state that we had, we didn't, at least as far as I'm aware, we had a lot of problems. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not saying things were better in history. You know, you had young people, you know, much higher infant mortality rate. You had people dying of dysentery and all of these things, right? For the most part, though, we didn't seem to have this problem. So again, maybe the solution, when every time we've allowed more government, these problems have gotten worse. Maybe, just maybe, the solution is more government. Let's just put that on the back burner. Keep that in the back of our mind for a while. Maybe the solutions aren't always more government. But I love that. It's not always pleasant when people are moved involuntarily from their homes or required to sell their land. With a lot of these radical left-wing politicians, I wonder if then you were to then use this same logic and say that somewhere about Gaza, it's a hot topic at the moment, right? Let's say that about Gaza. Let's just say we're going to do that to all of the Palestinians, right? Oh, it's not always pleasant when people are moved involuntarily from their homes or required to sell their land. They would most likely recoil in abject horror that you would suggest that notion. But of course, because it's indigenous Irish people in Ireland and they have a lighter skin tone, which has now made them enemies of the people, enemies of the whole world, well, anything can be done to them. You can't do any injustice to them because no injustice could be done to them because they're always oppressors no matter what the situation is. So it's not always pleasant when people are moved involuntarily from their homes or required to sell their land. It wasn't pleasant when Stalin done it. It wasn't pleasant when Lenin done it. It wasn't pleasant when Mao done it. It wasn't pleasant when the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia done it. It wasn't pleasant when anyone has done it. But when you have one side, these politicians here, it highlights the gross incongruity, which naturally is a consequence of the evil that they've allowed to be festered in their brain. It's okay when they do it, but if you were to suggest that, oh, okay, well, it's okay when it happens to these people as well, they'd reject it. They'd be in abject horror. But it makes you wonder, what are they trying to do here? What are they trying to do here? Well, not directly in this country, not directly in Ireland, not directly in the UK. There was a recent Democrat representative in America by the name of Yvette Clarke that just literally, I don't even think, because a lot of these people, they're not the most intelligent people, literally just said the quiet part out loud, where she said, quote, "I need more migrants in my district for redistricting purposes." That's what she said. So she can redistribute them so that they can be, for lack of a better term, gerrymandered, I suppose. Or the gerrymandering is when you mess with the borders for voting and stuff like that. And they're literally saying they want to overthrow democracy, overthrow the democratic right and vote of the people that live in these places by just ferrying in more people that then they can put into these districts that will outvote them. This is exactly what I've been saying. This is the exact purpose of the Nation of Sanctuary plan. This is the exact purpose of everything that's going on in Ireland and all of our nations at the moment. This is what's being pushed through by the EU bureaucracy as well, the tyrannical organization known as the EU. all coming down from the UN and the globalist organizations, right? But literally saying, you have Yvette Clarke here, a Democrat in New York, saying, I need more migrants in my district for redistricting purposes. Don't you ever tell me that these people have your best interests at heart ever again. Don't you ever tell me that these people care about democracy ever again, when they're literally trying to ferry people in because they want to overthrow people's democratic vote.
And from Brooklyn, New York, we have a diaspora that can absorb a significant number of these migrants. And when I hear colleagues talk about, the doors of the inn being closed, no room in the inn, I'm saying, I need more people in my district, but just for redistricting purposes. And those members could clearly fit here. And from Brooklyn, New York.
There it is. Allow me to play it for you one more time, ladies and gentlemen. Let me to just find the timestamp a moment. Let me play that for you one more time, just in case you didn't hear.
No room in the inn. I'm saying, I need more people in my district, but just for redistricting purposes. And
so there you go. Literally. The thing is, here, Yvette Clarke is very likely not intelligent enough to realize what she has just said. Very likely not intelligent enough to realize what she has just said. But also, you have to think of this in two ways. You have to think of this, are they too stupid to realize what they've just said? Or do they not care about hiding it anymore? And if they don't care about hiding it anymore, that can mean one of two things. It either means they know that their reign is at an end and they're trying to do everything that they can, cats out of the bag, everything, throwing every toy out the pram just to try and get anything, like the devil does, right? Like the devil does when he knows his reign's going to come to an end. He's going to try and get as many souls to come down to hell and be miserable with him as possible. So he's going to use every single little trick possible. I mean, upstairs, gentlemen, the times have changed. The last 5 years, the times have seriously changed. You can't really describe it necessarily, but you can feel it. Something is going on that is outside of us and outside of the material, I think, anyway. So it's either, again, they're that close to losing it so that they don't care about putting the mask on anymore, or their plan is that close to completion that they don't need to hide it anymore. And it's like game, set, match, done. And that's a scary scenario. I don't think it's that one. I think we've potentially got precious few opportunities to save what's coming, to save our societies from what is coming. But to do that, it's going to take something more than us. Put it that way. It's going to take something more than us. And this is the thing, and a lot of people on both sides tend to reject this kind of thing. They call it Christianity Sky Daddy and all stuff like that. They call God Sky Daddy, all of these things. But I'm like, with the conflict that's coming, with how these things can go and how they have done in the past, be like, regardless of how you feel about it, it's possibly worth, and regardless of if you feel we're going to win it or lose it or whatever, it's probably you worth, even just from a pragmatic perspective, even though, again, this should not be really the sole thing you start looking into faith and stuff like that for. But let's just say we do end up in like a civil conflict or whatever, or we do end up having to literally go to bat to defend our communities and things do get violent. Well, if we lose and we lose our lives as a result, well, you then have Pascal's wager to contend with, that if there is no God, there is no Jesus, whatever. There's no heaven, no hell, no other stuff. No harm, no foul, nothing to worry about. But if you're wrong and you didn't do certain things, then you do have some problems to contend with. So again, you have to weigh that up. You have to weigh that up and decide that if we were to lose, would you be willing to take Pascal's wager, so to speak? I don't think it's a gamble that anybody should take, personally. But if we are going to go to conflict, and you see this all throughout the early books of the Old Testament, for example, you see this, I believe there's a couple of battles in Deuteronomy or possibly Numbers. I think it starts off mainly in Numbers that a lot of these battles start. And what you tend to find is that when the Israelites, for example, going through having these battles with all of these other communities, it's God that decides the day. It's God that decides the day. See, the God is going to deliver your enemies into your hands, or he's going to deliver you into their hands. I believe one of the phrases was he's going to send you up one way and scatter you 7 ways. Or again, if you're in God's hand and he is at your back, you will go up one way and you will scatter them 7 ways, right? I believe that's the term that's used in scripture. Can't remember if that's the exact translation though. So again, if we are going to be seeing more and more deterioration, and we are going to be seeing potentially us having our own battles with our own government, because you can't necessarily take this lying down if the government decides it wants to seize your house, because where are you going to go? You've got nowhere else to go. It's kind of a thing that in some ways we have in common with, the Jews in modern day Israel, to be somewhat honest, right? Regardless of how you feel about that conflict, there's not many places really that they can go. I think that's what was their female prime minister's name? I can't remember, but said that, look, the one thing we do have is that we have nowhere else to go. So we're going to do our best to ensure our survival at all costs. In many ways, that's the case with us in this country as well. We have nowhere else to go. We're an island that's been invaded. We have no second home. We have no second citizenship for the most part. Some people are going to potentially hold second citizenship somewhere maybe, and they can flee. But a lot of us, like me, for example, we have nowhere else to go. And our home is our castle. So we need to be prepared to defend it. You're going to be prepared to defend it. You want God to be at your back. You want God to be at your back. So that even if, for example, you do end up losing your life, well, you don't want to be on the wrong end of that wager afterwards. Anyway, off my soapbox now. This is something which it really, really radicalized me when I read this the other day. It radicalized me more and more and more. So this happened in London recently, and a 9-year-old girl was shot in a gangland dispute, which was an attempted assassination of rival gang members in Dalston in East London. And when I saw this, I quoted it and I said, my belief that remigration in many instances is going to be an undue kindness for a lot of people just expanded massively. Because this should never, ever be happening. So what happened was there was a shooting by a gunman riding a motorbike, and this was a rivalry between the Tottenham Turks and the Hackney Turks. Why we have gangs, they're literally known as Tottenham Turks and Hackney Turks. Well, I do have an idea, because they were brought over by successive governments that wanted mass migration. Very likely. It's very likely that these don't go back, more than 50 years, I would say. I could be wrong. But I can't imagine these being around in like the time of the craze, for example. What happened was, in the crossfire, I believe it was, a 9-year-old girl was shot in the head by a motorbike riding gunman in East London in an attempted assassination of rival gang members, court has heard. So I don't believe they've named the gunman, but they did name some of the people who were targeted, I believe. These people, Ali Nasser, 43, either Keenan or Kenan Adogdu, however you say it, and then Mustafa Kitsiltam, 38. So you have 43, 45, and 38. Again, these lovely, eloquent British names, right? Who were linked to the Hackney Turks, were sat outside a busy Evan restaurant on Kingsland High Street, Hackney, when 6 shots were fired at the group in 2 seconds. The first bullet missed and hit the girl, who was sitting at an inside table with her family on the evening of 29th of May last year, and lodged in her brain. So the imported gang violence that successive governments have brought over damn near killed. And I saw some people saying that this actually killed her. They don't believe the 9-year-old girl had died. Later on in the article, it says she survived. I think she went on. She didn't go on to make a full recovery, I don't believe. She said this incident probably is going to affect her for the rest of her life. All the victims survived. The girl needed operations to rebuild her skull with titanium and was in hospital for 3 months before being allowed to go home. She will have physical and cognitive difficulties for the rest of her life. So this 9-year-old girl is going to grow up with these physical and cognitive difficulties all the rest of her life from something that was completely preventable. That was completely preventable by not having drastic open border policy in the first place and not having our noses needing to be rubbed in diversity. Now, could this have happened anyway? Yeah, sure. Would it have been less likely that it would have happened? I think you make a compelling case. I think you make a compelling case. Because say you want about, you know, a lot of criminals and stuff like that. A lot of them, their fathers, you know, they have wives and stuff like that. Like the mob in New York, for example. A lot of them, they had, you know, they were obviously sons. A lot of them brought their sons into the life, right? But, and again, not saying that these people meant to go after this girl, obviously. But Sammy the Bull Gravano, as I used to talk about a lot of the podcasts he mentioned that there was a hit that he was going to put out on somebody, and they set up for it. I can't remember the guy's name. I believe later on he was hit by a different group, I believe it was. But they were going to do this hit, and they prepared for it. They were ready to go hit, but because he was walking with his family, because he had his young children with him, you know, I believe he was walking down the street with, I believe he had his wife and daughter, I believe it was. They decided not to do the hit. They decided not to do the hit. They was like, no, not here. Not here. We won't do it here. They knew what they had to do, obviously, because if they didn't do it, they would get killed. And it's not justifying this anything whatsoever. This whole entire enterprise is disgusting, right? But there's that, again, element of understanding there. Being like, the kids have nothing to do with this. It's like if a guy was in the mafia and he got hit, you know, typically then the wife and the family would be taken care of, you know, financially and stuff like that. You know, there's that weird kind of honor there that a lot of these same people coming from these places don't have. We've seen how their culture treats children. We've seen how children are treated in, you know, a lot of these countries where Islam is the predominant religion, for example. It's completely different. It's completely different. And we should have no part of this. This doesn't belong on our streets. Prosecutors say the shooting was part of an ongoing dispute between the Tottenham Turks and Hackney Turks, also known as the Bombacilars or Bombacilars, who know. Sorry, there's a phone call coming through, ladies and gentlemen. I'll have to pick up that later. Known as the Bombers, whose intense rivalry over more than a decade has seen extreme violence used between them. Oh, here we go. So they did name the driver. Sorry. Somebody by the name of Javon Riley of Farnborough, Hampshire, is on trial at the Old Bailey, where he denies 4 charges of attempted murder, an alternative charge of causing grievous bodily harm with intent relating to the girl cannot be identified because of her age. Prosecutors say Riley wasn't a member of the Tottenham Turks, but was linked to them and knew they were behind the shooting. The gunman who arrived on the scene on an extremely powerful red caddy monster has not been arrested, but Riley is said to have played a key role before, during, and after the alleged attempted murders. He is alleged to have been an integral part of the plan as he carried out reconnaissance and carried the gunman away from the scene. So seemingly, at least, he's an accomplice. He's not a direct part of this. He's an accomplice. But I don't think yet they've found the shooter. There is another person named here, a man called Kem. Prosecutors say is Kemal Eren, one of those closely involved in the Tottenham Turks. Then they said, this is from Mr. Mulhound, who I believe, is he the prosecutor? I believe he's the prosecutor. James Mulhound said, "It is clear from all evidence that Javon Riley knew this was a job for individuals connected with the Tottenham Turks, the level of violence required, and the aim was to kill those seated outside the restaurant, and played an integral part in setting the scene so that this came about." So yeah, this is now what we have to contend with on the streets of Britain. Gang disputes, foreign gang disputes that we never asked for, mind you. Reminds me of a bunch of, I believe it was 2 Turkish barbers, I believe it was, in a town very, very close to me a couple of months ago. I believe it was in February. The videos came out of them having this massive brawl in the middle of the street. They had crowbars, they had the lot. This is what our governments have done. They've put your children in direct danger, put your children in direct line of fire, by importing who they know in many instances to be radicalized people who don't have any regard for our lives and anything like that. Not good, morally upright, virtuous, hardworking people. They've done it for the same reason you heard Yvette, what was her name? Yvette Clarke say just now, for redistricting purposes. They brought them in for their vote. So not only have they put you in danger, they've done it so that they can secure their fat paychecks and secure their job the next time around, because they know that they've done an absolutely atrocious job and betrayed the British people at every single turn. And they knew that if this was a society a couple of 100 years ago, they'd be swinging from the end of a rope. That's the kind of political system that we have. A lot of people floating the question at the moment where, oh shit, I accidentally closed on my tab. Sorry, guys. That I wanted to read. Makes you wonder, we spoke about this a lot with James Monroe, for example, where he said one of the most dangerous things at the moment is this notion that there's no political solution. I find myself coming back to that question. Scary, but I find myself coming back to that question a lot, the more and more I see. So obviously now, ladies and gentlemen, on the end of the last episode, we discussed a Labour MP known as Tim Roca, who was videoed at an event saying that transphobes, quote unquote, are swivel-eyed and not well people. And I posted this on X, with the podcast extract on X. And it should surprise you that Tim Roca is not just your average Labour MP, but is one of the most radical people with regards to the whole pride religion, I suppose. So we have a leaked email now. So after this, I said that these people live in a complete inversion of reality. They're extremely dangerous. There's a leaked email that came out in the aftermath of the Supreme Court judgment, where he suggested that there will be, quote, nowhere for a trans person to go to the toilet. No, they could just go to the toilet aligned with their biological sex. And he is also, quote, pushing for the puberty blockers trial to be open as possible to, quote, vindicate our position. So this is the leaked email that comes from Tim Roca, the Member of Parliament for Macclesfield. What comes now is uncertain. The answers to the questions raised by the Supreme Court will be determined by the Government, Equality and Human Rights Commission. And Society, I believe it is. Sorry, it's slightly cut off at the top. Let me, I got an idea. There we are. Right. There we are. Right. At Society at large. Will it be acceptable for there to be no way for a trans person to go to the toilet? Will it be possible to run a service exclusively for all women, including trans women, which are, as we know, men masquerading as women, trying to wear womanhood like a cloak? What will happen if someone is incorrectly identified as a trans person? Makes you think maybe we shouldn't be, getting into this whole trans thing in the first place. Maybe we could say, you want to go and do these irreversible surgeries because you have this delusion that you're the other thing. Maybe we shouldn't take a scalpel anywhere near you. And maybe we should coach you through dealing with whatever it is that is plaguing you, that's making you think you got to go and mutilate yourself to be happy. Maybe we can deal with that. And then there's no confusion as to what people are. There's no confusion as to what people are then. There are also questions about what the purpose of a gender recognition certificate now is and the function of the Gender Recognition Act. Gender is a term that was deliberately designed to sow this kind of confusion. We need to get rid of it. We need to get rid of it and go back to biological sex classification. We absolutely need to. And recognizing that gender, in the way that it's being purported now, is simply a pseudonym for personality, but is now being weaponized as this protected characteristic in this Marxist framework. And that's what it needs to be getting rid of, because you can have infinite personalities. You can have, girls or women that dress up a little bit more masculine. You can, have men that, not necessarily hyper masculine. You can have men that dress up a little bit more feminine, and people have all these things, these vices that they got to deal with and such. But bringing it into law, enshrining their vices as protected into law, was one of the worst things we ever done, especially when it was based on fraudulent research right from the base. Given that the GRA, so Gender Recognition Act, says if the acquired gender is the male gender, the person's sex becomes that of a man, and if it is the female gender, the person's sex becomes that of a woman for all purposes, what this now means, because of the Supreme Court, is yet to be determined. The Supreme Court judgment, I think, was fairly, explicit in that we're going to enshrine biological sex as the distinction, which is the way that it always has been, and just what aligns with reality. Mr. Roca, I'm sorry that your delusions don't align with reality, but that's just the way it is. So here he says, this is the paragraph underneath then, I've skipped a little bit on. I am aware that this is just the latest in a line of events that has undermined the rights of trans people in this country. I have written to many of you about the ban on puberty blockers before and wanted to let you know I am still pushing for the puberty blockers trial to be as open as possible so that the trial can be robust. Given how small the cohort of patients is in this area to get a representative sample, the trial may have to include the vast majority of those seeking puberty blockers anyway. If we are to believe in our principles, we should be confident the trial will vindicate our position. That's actually quite scary. It's typically you go into a study, you go into a trial seeking to put what you believe under scrutiny. That is the whole thing with like null hypothesis testing. You want to be able to reject the null hypothesis, which is the opposite of what you think will happen. And that's in a way what you're testing. Again, the whole thing is these people are coming at it the complete inversion of the way science is usually done. They're trying to come at it and just trying to what is it? I love how Lane Norton says this, where he says, if you torture the data enough, it will show whatever you want it to show. That's what they're trying to do now, and that's why they're trying to get as many kids on these as possible. This is deeply evil. That's what I mean. Your average Labour MP at this point is deeply evil. They want to be able to have no consequences for killing children in the womb right up until the moment of birth. They want to be able to sterilize the young children that we have, all the while importing a bunch of foreigners with, however many, 4, 6, 7 kids usually, and, just as many wives. So again, the game plan is clear. The game plan is clear, doing everything they can to eliminate us and bring in these other people because they see them as more attractive for keeping their position intact because of how much they've damaged their relationship with us. So they've done everything. They've lied to us repeatedly again and again and again. And now rather than actually atoning for it and making things better for us, the indigenous people that live here, right, they're now going to bring in this foreign voting bloc and do everything possible for them. Whilst they get everything from you, mind, you're the one subsidizing this in order to obfuscate and keep their power by removing your ability to remove them. Deeply, deeply evil people. Deeply, deeply evil people. Under control of a deeply evil spirit known as Satan. And that's why, again, this is not merely a material conflict. This is a spiritual one. Speaking of spiritual conflict and stuff like that, one thing which came out recently, we mentioned that the Catholic Church was hit, the Church of the Holy Family was hit in Gaza. And there's been a lot of discussion in my comment section on the clip where I talked about this, which I really, really appreciate, with regards to this, whether it was intentional, whether it was not. A lot of discourse still going around it. I think a lot of people's reactions, which we'll be talking about towards the end of this episode, have sort of, again, discredited it a little bit as being accidental. And I'm not saying that it was intentional or anything like that. I'm more so how people will so quickly go to, oh yeah, well, the hostages have been released. And I've been one of the people that's been calling for the hostages to be released every single time I've talked about this issue, that, has Hamas been removed? We know what Hamas want to do to Jews, all of these things. Yeah, nobody's arguing that. But then for that to be, for example, your straightaway defense when it comes to an issue that really has nothing to do with that, seemingly, because at least as far as I'm aware, there's no evidence that the church in this instance was harboring hostages or helping Hamas or aiding Hamas or was sympathetic to Hamas in any way. A lot of the churchgoers in the Catholic Church in Gaza, obviously there's a very, very small Catholic population, which only makes up about 0.13% of the population there, that a lot of them are children. So again, when you take that line for an issue where nothing really is relevant there, the hostages are relevant to every single discussion about the issue of Israel and Gaza and securing peace in the Middle East, for sure. But with regards to the question of whether Israel or the IDF intentionally attacked a church, unless they again have clear evidence that the hostages are being held there or whatever, that's not really relevant. That's not really relevant. And again, I've seen people on the other side saying that modern day state of Israel is not not biblical Israel. Netanyahu's acting like Hitler, all of these things. The IDF has super precise weaponry. So again, there was no reason for this to happen. It was intentional. Hear all those things. I'm not necessarily all the way to saying that Netanyahu is like Hitler or anything like that yet, purely because I've thought about this more and more recently. Is that I don't really like using comparisons to Hitler anymore. I think with what's going on in the UK at the moment, I think comparisons to what happened in Mao's China, comparisons to what happened in the Soviet system, the Eastern Bloc and all of these things, very, very pertinent to the discussion. I do. But you just got to be wary, in my opinion, now with comparisons to Hitler, just because how much his name has been misused. That organizations like Hope Not Hate in this country, for example, has called anybody Hitler for objecting to open borders and objecting to the Islamic takeover of the country and all of these things. Anybody who tries to talk about the rape gangs, they're literally Hitler, they're Nazis, they're this, they're white supremacists, all that kind of stuff, right? Because of how much people have used Hitler's name improperly. And I think that's why you're now seeing a lot of young people in particular who, again, not necessarily the most apt at guiding themselves, now falling into the framework of Hitler was the good guy. But like, no, Hitler would have eliminated us as well had he had the chance, I believe, anyway. He was attacking us. He was attacking, London, bombing our cities, all of these things. He wasn't our friend, right? He's not a good guy. But now, because of how much the name has been misused, because of how much the meaning and the actions that he undertook have been either revised, or because of people, again, misusing his name to simply talk about the concerned parent that doesn't want a bunch of unvetted migrant males in their town attacking their kids, are being called Hitler, that now, or being called Nazis, that label has lost all its meaning. And that's why I don't necessarily just like comparisons to Hitler and stuff like that. I'd be like, if you have evidence, for example, that Netanyahu is this evil figure, people make accusations, for example, that he's propping up Hamas, he's doing this in order to go on this massive genocide, ethnic cleansing campaign. I hear all the accusations and stuff like that. Make those on the basis of themselves. And, you can say things like it's demonic, all of these things. Okay. Again, you have to make that case. And I'm not the one making that case here, but I don't like comparisons to Hitler, those kinds of things. And when people say like I don't know, I'm confused more than anything. I'm still thinking about it. You know what I mean? But again, with the more and more this is dragged on, and when things like this happen, the questions do arise. Like, one of the things I talked about with the person that left the comment about, the hostages and, what Hamas wants to do or stuff like this. And I was like, that's all. And I've even been critical. I've even tried to highlight the Pope. The Pope, as far as I know, still hasn't talked about the Druze genocide that's going on. The genocide in Syria. I mean, like, please say something. You have people being killed in their thousands. One of the people that was recently killed by Jelani's militants was an American citizen. And obviously, if you didn't know this, the Pope is American, right? He lives in the Vatican, obviously, but the Pope is American. Like, just say something. And it makes me think that you're not wanting to say something because you know how radical these people are. I don't want to say I'm not trying to talk negative of the Holy Father or anything like that, but I'm like, is this just because you don't want the blowback or to be perceived as quote unquote Islamophobic and all of these things when the Jews are being persecuted, Christians are being persecuted all throughout the Middle East, not just by Israel or anything like that. But the one thing that did happen, so when this church was hit, it's seemingly in a pattern. And I saw another quite troubling video where I believe it was a Christian school that had allegedly, this is what the person who posted the video alleged, was, I believe, attacked by the IDF. And when they went in, they actually put like a bunch of graffiti all over the walls, like, Hebrew graffiti and all of these things. I'll just see if I can find the post that mentioned it, because I believe I bookmarked it. Yeah, it says here, apparently after destroying the Rosary Sisters Catholic school in Gaza with bulldozers and tanks, this person always called them IDF terrorists. I'm not necessarily going to say that. They graffitied the walls with Hebrew writing, and the person incorrectly, I believe, called it the Star of Baphomet. I believe it's the Star of Redran. I believe it's where is it? Rephan. I believe it is. That's what they call the Star of David, I believe, or it might be a different one. I get these confused from time to time. Again, I'm not an expert on these things. I want to say that. But this is that video for you, ladies and gentlemen. This is, I believe, the Latin Patriarch or the Cardinal Pizzaballa going in and seeing this. I'm not sure what they're actually saying, but here is that video. So again, the point I'm making here is that, look, the IDF and Israel, the secular state of Israel, with the biblical differences, with the differences in faith and stuff like that, when these things do happen, when a church gets attacked and all things like this, questions are going to arise whether is it intentional or not. And they are perfectly valid questions to ask that, especially when you look back through history, you look at the differences between Christians and Jews, and then you see things like this, for example. So you can see writing on the walls. This is the star over in the corner that she's running behind this guy in the white t-shirt. I'll just rewind it a little bit for you. So this is, you can see it here just behind this guy with the t-shirt on here. This is the star. I don't know what any of this means. So again, if anybody knows what this is saying and can clarify this in the comments, please do. Please clarify this. If the person posting this, for example, has got the wrong take on it with the writing and all stuff like that, please let me know. I'm open for discussion on these things. But this is not good. When you see things like this, again, it really does damage. And this is the thing that gets me, is it really damages the cause of Israel. And if this is Israel doing this, or the IDF doing this, it really doesn't bode well. Now, I don't know if this school was being used by Hamas as a weapons base or anything like that. Again, if you have any additional information, please do let me know. But it was good to see, though, and this is the thing where God's always said, at least from my limited understanding, one of the key principles he keeps coming back to is that he can take evil and he can take the most evil thing and turn it to good in his power, because he's obviously all powerful. What you're seeing is now an impressive unity, seemingly, in the church. So this, if you're a Christian, for example, this should be very, very, not the atrocities that have happened and stuff like that, and the fact the war is still going on. We obviously want the war to end as soon as possible, but we want the hostages returned. We want everything put in place to make sure nothing like the October the 7th ever happens again. But what you're seeing is now the actual, in the aftermath of the church attack, you had Catholics and Orthodox figures from the church coming together, and in a way which hopefully we'll see in the very near future, a unified church coming again. So this is the video of after, in the aftermath of the church attack, or the aftermath of the church incident, whatever you want to call it, where the Orthodox and Catholic officials, you have cardinals and patriarchs, I believe, actually coming together after the incident. Shut this down. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't realize I was so loud. So this is really, really, you know, good to see in some ways. Again, God potentially turning a tragedy to a good way. Again, we're now seeing Christians that have been divided for nearly 1,000 years coming together. So that was what was happening in the aftermath of the church incident. And it just fill you full of hope that you certainly do hope we'll see a unified church in the future. So obviously the church that Christ set up, when you go back far enough, it wasn't heavily fractured like we see all the churches now, where you have, obviously, since the Protestant Reformation, you have all the different types of Protestant churches. You have Mormons, or the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, whatever it is. You have the Catholic Church, you have different sects of Orthodoxy, all of these things, where everything is just so divided along all these different lines. And what we're praying right now is for unity, and hopefully this is a sign that that's what we're going to be seeing in the near future. Obviously, it's quite refreshing. It was, hopeful to see the earlier photos between, I believe it was main Eastern Patriarch Bartholomew, I believe it was, and the Pope. They obviously met together. We can only hope for unity in the face of all this. Especially when, this was something I was going to say for the end, but I think I might put it in now. There's been a lot of controversy over a certain Protestant commentator's post about this recently. Joel Berry. So Joel Berry is the managing editor of the Babylon Bee. I like a lot of the Babylon Bee stuff, to be honest. I think they're quite good with coming up quite funny headlines and stuff like that. A lot of the things they have posted in the past, you could argue, have been quite anti-Catholic, and obviously they, I believe, at least for the most part, evangelical Protestants. There's an example here. Where is it? A common one they like to refer to, people that want to trash the Babylon Bee for being anti-Catholic and all of these things, is the headline about Mary. Is a headline about Mary. I'm just seeing if somebody's left it in the comments of the post. I don't believe that they have. But anyway, Joel, in the aftermath of the church attack incident, said that this won't be easy for people to hear, but there are only about 200 professed Catholics still living in Gaza, and they all support Hamas. That was his statement at 2:51 on July 19th, so about 5 days ago. He followed up in the comments and he said, true Christian faith still exists in Gaza, but it's all underground. Anyone allowed by Hamas to practice openly is allowed only to do so because they aid and support the terror regime. Again, quite a wild take, has to be said. A lot of people in the comments, saying that, Muslims and Christians have basically been at war for 1,400 years since the advent of Islam. That Hamas doesn't exactly treat Catholics very well. And no evidence that all the Catholics living in Gaza support Hamas. And even people that often aligned on some issues, like Kristen Hawkins, for example, posted in the comments, literally not trashing him or anything like that, but literally just saying this is just false. The cardinal does not support Hamas. So again, this is the weird thing about this post is, again, somebody put a comment on there. This is how many people are reading it, which, again, with the way that it's been phrased, it's hard to come to any other kind of conclusion. Is that the way you've phrased this is that, look, there's no other way to read it other than you've just said basically that they deserved it. And again, I just think the better thing to do in the aftermath of this, when either way, whatever happened, was that the church was attacked and Christians lost their lives, was not to say, at least in some instances, that they deserved it. Especially then you see, for example, photos like this. And I don't want to be accused of being a Hamas propagandist when I don't do that. When I, share images like this. Actually, no, I'm not going to share this image, because obviously I'll describe it for you instead. It's a bunch of children, outside the door to the church, and they're holding a you know, like the coloring books that you had, but it's like the drawings on a page, but it has the outline which you follow and you color in, of the Blessed Mother, all right, of the Holy Virgin Mary. And they're just holding this outside the church. And obviously the statement in this, all Catholics support Hamas if they live in Gaza and they're allowed to openly preach, basically saying that these children support Hamas. Not a good take. Not a good take. And again, where it says true Christian faith still exists in Gaza, it makes you wonder, when you hear this from evangelical Protestants and stuff like that, are they really? Even Father Matthew Schneider in the comments was saying that this is an insane take, saying like, these kinds of people, and I'm not speaking as this as a theological expert or anything like that, but when their faith literally came out of a rebellion against the church that already existed, right? They decided they were going to reject certain creeds, and many said they're going to reject the sacraments of the faith, the sacraments of the church. Are they really the ones to say anything about true Christian faith? That's where I've like, whenever I've thought about this in my head, I've thought about like, which one is true? And I started to dig, and the ones that really started to be true, the ones I have a hardest time reconciling between, and that's why I'm praying for unity more than anything, are the Catholic and the Orthodox, because they're the ones that had the schism. They were around way before any form of Protestantism ever existed. You know, they predate Protestantism, you know, by over 1,000 years. So if anyone's going to have a grasp on the true Christian faith, it's going to be one of those two, at least in my opinion. But yeah, this was an absolutely insane take, and he seemed to double down on it, which, again, just not a very good look. Even trying to be as charitable as possible. Says here, I love my Catholic brothers and sisters. I reject all the slander and twisting of what I say. I'll never stop calling out corruption and compromise in the church. That's something godly Protestants and Catholics should unite around. He's not necessarily wrong in that. He says, I apologize for nothing, go pound sand. But again, 200 professed Catholics still living in Gaza, and they all support Hamas. A lot of those people are children. You have to be careful with the words that you say. And I actually asked Grok, for example. Again, I know that Grok's being used as a source for all things. It's being memed the fuck out of it. But again, scanning across other social media posts, other outlets and stuff like that, I don't actually know what the relationship between Catholics and Hamas is like. So what Grok basically came back with was, when I asked it, what is the relationship like between Catholics in Gaza and Hamas? How does Hamas treat Catholics? That's what I asked. The relationship between Catholics in Gaza and Hamas is complex, shaped by the region's political, social, and religious dynamics. Gaza's Catholic community is small, numbering fewer than 400, with most Christians belonging to the Greek Orthodox Church and a smaller number attending the Holy Family Catholic Church. That was the one that was attacked. The following points outline the relationship between Hamas's treatment of Catholics based on the available information. So we went down the route of coexistence in a Muslim-majority region, perceived coercion or sympathy, which obviously I think what Joel would be getting at, interfaith solidarity, which is quite interesting. So you had, for example, Gaza is overwhelmingly Muslim, with Christians making up about 0.13% of the population. It's around 1,100 Christians in all. And then roughly 200 Catholics. That's of 2022. Catholics and other Christians live as a minority under Hamas's governance, which has ruled Gaza since 2007. Relations are generally peaceful, with interfaith cooperation in many community services like education and charity. For example, you have Christian-run schools, such as the one operated by the Rosary Sisters, and that was I believe that was the one that we showed, Rosary Sisters Catholic School, that was attacked again. So again, does make you think, right? And these schools educate many Muslim children, fostering some level of mutual support. So again, is this, for example, God taking an evil, for example, that is, the government in Gaza or whatever, if you can call them a government, and making some good out of it via the faithful that are there in terms of his Catholic and Christian community? You know, I'm not just saying just Catholics there. I'm putting all Christians there in together. Perceived coercion or sympathy. Some sources suggest that Catholics may face pressure from Hamas to align with its political or military objectives, particularly during conflicts with Israel. Posts on X have claimed that Catholics in Gaza are, quote, coerced by Hamas, with clergy potentially facing threats to their parishioners to ensure compliance. However, these claims are inconclusive without broader evidence. Others suggest that some Catholics may express sympathy for Hamas due to shared experiences of hardship under the Israeli blockade, or as a result of losing loved ones in Israeli military actions. The whole point being here is that there's just so much, what's the word I'm looking for? People use oppression, there's just so much hardship going on in this region of the world that it seems that it's bringing a lot of people together. It's weird that the hardship is bringing communities together in Israel, for example, where you have a 20% Arab population, and you have areas in Israel where only Muslims are allowed to go. Only Muslims are allowed to go up to where the temple is to pray. That's where the mosque is, right? Jews and Christians are not allowed up there. So you have this really, again, and this is where I'm understanding how complex it is now. The point where he made about interfaith solidarity is where it says Christians, including Catholics, often emphasize the Palestinian identity, sharing the same struggles as their Muslim neighbors under the Israeli blockade and ongoing conflicts. This solidarity is reflected in statements like, we are all Palestinians, we live in the same city with the same suffering. Hamas has publicly condemned attacks on Christians, such as the 2007 murder of Rami Ayad, a Christian bookstore manager, and vowed to protect the Christian community, though perpetrators were never brought to justice. That last part there where it says, vowed to protect the Christian community, it kind of reminds me of like an evil person like an Assad. Instantly, somebody like Assad came to mind there, where Assad in no way necessarily a good person, you know. But where it says there that they vowed to protect the Christian community, the Druze and Christian communities and stuff like that, the minority communities in Syria now, for example, since Assad has been gone, are suffering a far worse fate, seemingly, than what they did suffer under Assad, at least as far as I know. At least as far as I know. Maybe you guys have got more information from me on why that's not the correct take. Please let me know. I'm open to learning more. You guys might know a lot more about this than I do. But instantly there, when it says vow to protect the Christian community, it does throw a little bit of a spanner in the Israeli narrative. It has to be said. And I'm saying that as somebody that wants to see the hostages returned yesterday. I've never wanted to see hostages taken, and not one of these rape is resistance woke lefty. Nothing can be done to you that is in any way unjustifiable just because you're Israeli, Zionist, whatever type. The one justice for all, right? Just justice with a capital J, so to speak. So yeah, what does remain constant, however, regardless of if Joel Berry's take on the situation is absolutely abhorrent, whether you think it is or not, I think there are certain things that we should absolutely be working towards, and that is the extraction of every single hostage from Gaza, every single Israeli hostage, whether they're alive or dead. The holding to account of who was responsible, Hamas, who was responsible, obviously, but then doing what we can to make sure there's no further bloodshed. And how that happens, I don't know. I think you are going to have one side, and this is the thing that really stuck out to me the other day. Either it is going to have to be the case of certain people are moved from that area, because eventually, if you just have two people that can't get along no matter what, you just keep them separate from each other. So I guess it's either going to have to be the case of, the Palestinian state, if you want to give it that, is dissolved and Israel takes it over, but, not peacefully. Maybe some agreement can be made for, Palestinians to be settled elsewhere or whatever. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I literally just talked about this with the Irish incident at the start of the episode, right? So I don't like this, but this is just acknowledging reality how it is, at least how I see it. Either that's going to have to happen, or there's going to have to be some element of de-radicalization, maybe on both sides, because you see a lot of Israeli commentators, for example, saying they need to take over Gaza and, completely, encapsulate it as part of Israel, incorporate it into that identity, and change all of the infrastructure in there so that it complies with Israel, which many Palestinians, for example, might see as a taking away of their sovereignty or whatever, and they may not like that. I don't know. There's going to have to be some de-radicalization on both sides, that's for sure, obviously. But yeah, I'm just hoping that cooler heads are going to prevail and that we're just going to see an end to the bloodshed. We're going to see hostages returned and bodies returned, and just an end to the suffering. I hope that's just not, pie in the sky fantasy, I suppose. But again, we'll see what happens going forward now. On to one of the most pivotal topics in Wales, which I saw recently. So there's two things to go over now to finish off. This is quite interesting. So in Wales, they've recently launched, a journalist known as Will Hayward has launched a new fund, I believe, and I believe this is from the government. So again, where's this fund coming from? If it's going to be some kind of fund, it's likely going to be taxpayer funded, right? To help aspiring journalists get on the ladder, which in theory is a great thing, right? Because there's, especially with regards to journalism in Wales, it's almost a very state-run, seemingly. You're seeing a rise of citizen journalists and stuff like that at the moment, but no real, Wales doesn't have, for good or for worse, like a Tucker Carlson figure, I don't think, you know what I mean? Where again, a journalist that is really holding their own establishment to account and really putting across like true opposition to really hold them to account, whether you agree with his points or not. And in many instances, I don't think that I actually do. But it's forcing dialogue that you'd never get if all of the journalists were just, state puppet question askers. So again, this fund to help aspiring journalists get on the ladder, good thing in theory, but it's weird. As Doge Wales, Senedd Waste guys pointed out, there's a bit of a catch. The work has to be related to one of Will Hayward's pre-chosen topics. There's 4 of them. So to qualify for this fund, subject or investigation must be on one of these 4 things: climate change and biodiversity loss, poverty, the rise of the far right and or political extremism, and exposing misinformation, disinformation, and or fact-checking. Already you're seeing why I'm sort of like, looking a little bit disappointed, or kind of the look of like, I told you so. It's like, finally, there's a fund here that seems to be funding journalists that want to do more work of the regime. That's what it seems to be, which is very, very concerning. Obviously, because a journalist, I believe Matt Taibbi said, it's you tell the story. You tell the story. The story leads the way, no matter whether it's aligns with your biases or is against your biases, whatever it may be. The story is king. The story is the leader. But again, there's some notable omissions from this list, as you may know. The biggest one, poverty is a big one. Climate change is a very, very small issue being masqueraded as a big one in order to extract more tax money. It's funny how he puts climate change and biodiversity loss in there when one of the biggest things we're doing to combat climate change is get solar panels and wind turbines everywhere, which, destroy habitats and kill birds and all of these things at alarming rates. He's gone about biodiversity loss, but you're getting rid of all the grass, you're getting rid of all the birds because they're being chopped up by wind turbines, and you're putting these mechanical monsters in the field. Yeah, okay. But immigration, as they mentioned here, is by far the main issue affecting politics right now. Whether you like it or not, whatever side of the political aisle you fall on, that is true. That is true. It's by far the biggest issue. And one notable omission you'll see here, there's nothing here on nation of sanctuary. Ready to make Wales a nation of sanctuary, especially, being against nation of sanctuary and all of these things. As they point out, cheap labour from abroad has suppressed Welsh workers' wages, unfairly pricing them out of many jobs. This is obviously a main cause of poverty, so perhaps Hayward will fund a piece of work along these lines. Perhaps he won't. Will Hayward, from when you listen to him, at least from the brief bits that I've listened to him, he's very much so more on the side of the political left, I would say. He had an interview with one of the ministers that was responsible for bringing in the 20 mile per hour blanket system and he couldn't fawn over him enough from what I was saying. You brought in the system. It's objectively saved lives. It's all of this stuff. So again, very much so, seemingly, and I like how they put journalist when they first mention Bill, they say journalist, because again, it makes you wonder, whether there's a certain bias that's coming from this fund or coming for this fund, and a certain bias they're trying to put onto aspiring journalists that are coming up, right? The rise of the far right and political extremism. I like to say and or political extremism. So again, no mention. I'm assuming it would fall into the political extremism headline. But again, no mention of far left, Antifa, communism, socialism, none of those things, right? Exposing misinformation, disinformation. Usually the people that use those terms, do so simply because it's information that they don't like. I don't like the terms, I think I've said this before, I don't like the terms misinformation and disinformation anymore, because for the same reason that I mentioned before why I don't like making Hitler comparisons. Because once these words used to mean something, now they mean nothing because they've been shown to have been misused in such big ways. So we need new terms now. Just say that it's incorrect. There's no, sorry, I know I'm tripping on my words. There's no room for politicization there. It's just incorrect or correct information. Successful applicants will be paid between £150 and £500 for their time, depending on the depth of the investigation required. They must also have some journalistic training. So they also point out with the Senate election in 10 months' time, Hayward warns the, quote, amount of misinformation will soar, unquote. He also says young people and those in most deprived areas are the, quote, main targets for this. Patronizing indeed. Patronizing indeed. Areas like mine that have been crippled seemingly by the policies that Will Hayward is a fan of. But yeah. And again, they say here, we would also be interested to learn how Hayward is funding this new initiative. Is he generously paying for it out of his own pocket, off the back of subscriptions to his well-plugged newsletter, or have sponsors come forward to meet the cost? So again, is it being sponsored by somebody? If so, who is sponsoring it? Is it, again, taxpayer funded? Who knows? Who the hell knows? He did correctly claim, however, that Wales is a limited media landscape, which is what I'm trying to do with this podcast, for example, to try to change that. But it's largely the result of legacy media organisations like BBC Wales and Hayward himself ignoring some of the scandalous ideological projects the Senate members fund. As I mentioned, he was a very big fan of the 20-mile-per-hour Sustran stuff. So I wonder if Will Hayward would like to take up this last story to do with political extremism, or potentially to do with immigration and all of these things, right? Maybe he'll call it for exposing misinformation or fact-checking. This was a video that was posted very recently. And I want you to watch this video. It was posted 5 days ago. And this is from a school in England. And the title of this video, it was recorded on Snapchat. You can tell by the style of banner that the text is in. You catch an POV, you catch an EDL member in SKL. So I'm not sure where the school is. I'm assuming that just stands for school. And what you'll find is there's a bunch of kids here. They are attacking a young white kid and then pouring a drink on his head as they sit there and laugh. They said they did this because he's in the EDL. And that's quite interesting because obviously the EDL doesn't exist anymore. So whether he says that he likes the EDL, whether he says that he likes the work of Tommy Robinson or whatever. But it's quite interesting to find this EDL member in school when now that organization doesn't exist anymore. But here's that video for you, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to mute the music. So here it is. I'll play it one more time. You have here, they've just obviously beaten him and now they're pouring water on his head because he sat on the floor, turned around, and it does appear to be not that person, not being that person, but possibly one or two generations descended from people who let's just say, are not native to this country. But this is okay. This is okay. So if you describe somebody as EDL or an enemy, then, especially if they're white, you can do whatever the hell you want to them. That's the kind of state that we live in now. There'll be a lot of people that will say that this was completely justified. There was absolutely nothing wrong with this. Obviously, we don't know the wider context of what was going on. We don't know if, you know, the kid was attacking them. You know, saying things about their race or whatever it might have been. Who knows? Who knows? If you have any more context on this issue, please let me know. But I actually quoted this. I said, Piers Morgan. I was like, are you going to come on and call these kids vermin and call for severe retribution for waterboarding this young kid? Because this, ladies and gentlemen, should remind you of what happened to a young Syrian boy, the name of Jamal, who, from testimony in court, although the judge later ruled and said that the girls were liars, his classmates, and with the evidence that was presented, a lot of people like to get this confused when Tommy Robinson put his documentary Silenced up on X and then he was put in prison for contempt of court. People mistakenly thought that it was because the things in the film were incorrect, and that's what he went to prison for. No, he went correct because he went to prison because he was ordered not to release the film. There was no, you know, claim that anything in the film was false. He was ordered not to release it. And you have testimony in there that was recorded in hidden camera testimony from people in Huddersfield Council with regards to the incident involving Bailey, who's still in hiding, I believe, by the way, and all his family is. This incident happened years and years and years ago. He's still in hiding. And the girls who came forward in his class, the kids in his class came forward to testify that he'd attacked one of them with a hockey stick. He'd done all these heinous things. And allegedly, he said to Bailey that he was going to rape his sister. So Bailey just gave him a bit of schoolyard justice. As the older boy, as the bigger boy, and as the you know, defender of his sister, defender of his family, gave him a little bit of schoolyard justice and just brought him down to the ground and poured a water bottle over his head. And Piers Morgan jumped on it and said that the Bailey was vermin. Said that he was a vermin. And said that it was waterboarding. Or the media, at least. The media, at least, it might not have been Piers Morgan specifically, said that the kid was waterboarded. And Piers Morgan then called for severe retribution. Bear in mind, Bailey at the time was 15. Bailey at the time was 15. Now, what happened in the aftermath of that incident is that a bunch of Muslims came to the school. They were threatening to, I believe they were threatening to behead the head teacher. They all ganged up around the school, threatening to do all these heinous things, threatening to kill Bailey. In the documentary Silence, by the way, you can actually see, I don't think it's up anywhere online now, the stacks that Tommy and his team had printed of the threats that Bailey and his family were receiving were about this high. You know, I'm about 4 feet off the ground here, I believe it was. Whether that was done for artistic effect, I don't know. But the threats they were receiving was in the thousands or the tens of thousands. They're going to rape his family, they're going to rape his sister, rape his mom, kill him, make him watch, burn his house down, all of these things. Heinous things from this community. Religion of peace, mind you. And as I said, Bailey and his family still in hiding. And Huddersfield Council paid 5-figure sums to the head teacher, to certain people who were working with Jamal specifically, to keep stum about it. I believe one guy was paid about 20 grand to stay stum about it. So where's the severe retribution? That's not what I'm calling for, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. But where's the severe retribution going to be for this kid? Are these children vermin? Should they face severe retribution? But of course this is fine because it happened to a white guy, so just an evil oppressor, right? Anyway, that'll do it for today. Thank you. And by the way, on that video, ladies and gentlemen, you couldn't hear it because obviously I muted it. They were laughing and giggling to themselves the whole way, so they took glee in doing this, these young boys. muted it just in case the video with the music in the background was going to, potentially get flagged for copyright or whatever. So hope we all have a fantastic, hope I gave you some things to think about, morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever we are. And I will catch up with you very, very soon. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. We'll see you next time. Godspeed.